Hello everyone, my name is Tim Petey and welcome to the final Ground Control review of Massive Month, Ground Control 2 Operation Exodus. But does it hold up like the first game, or does it flop like Dark Conspiracy? Let's find out.
The story for Ground Control 2 is actually almost completely separated from the first game in Dark Conspiracy. Set 322 years after Ground Control, things are very different in the galaxy. Kraven and the Order are gone, and now a new power has taken hold, the Terran Empire, bent on controlling the entire galaxy. They conquer anyone they encounter, and for years now have been systematically conquering the planets of the Northern Star Alliance, a small coalition of colonies fighting a losing war. The Terrans have almost won and have pushed the NSA back to their home planet of Morningstar Prime.
For the entire game, you take on the role of Jacob Angelus, a newly promoted captain in the NSA. Some of his fellow commanders include Gloryhound General Warhurst, Cowboy Major Grant, and Frenchwoman Lieutenant Lacroix. The primary antagonist of the game is the ruthless leader of the Terran military, Imperator Vlana Azleia, the Butcher of Ariel. Some other characters appear later on in the game as allies to the NSA or as allies of the Terrans. But needless to say, this game definitely has a lot more characters that provide major roles than either previous entry.
As the game begins, an unknown probe crash lands in the city. Angelus recovers it and hands it over to McNeil for analysis. After this, there are a number of missions simply built around pushing the Terrans back from the city limits. Eventually, the Terrans actually manage to get troops into the city again and take control of a shield node that is part of a massive shield that protects the city from orbital bombardment. Angelus manages to recapture the node, but mysterious projectiles somehow pass through the shield. It turns out that they are Viren assault pods containing a large number of Viren troops, and they land in a residential area where Major Grant's wife is staying at the time. She is killed during the attack, and Warhurst takes Grant out of the chain of command.
The history of the Virens actually plays a big part in the story of Ground Control 2. Centuries ago, Major Parker was actually the first person to encounter the Virens and brought them to the attention of the galaxy at large. Sometime afterward, their home planet was actually destroyed, and now they are forced to roam the galaxy in their massive clan ships filled with methane, the atmosphere of their homeworld. A number of clans exist, 13 in all, and they are led by a Vykath, who is the head of the clan and makes all of the clan's decisions for them. One clan, the Krihas, are actually willing slaves of the Terrans, reveling in their master's killing. Two other clans, the Hrog and the Haxdoom, are allies of the NSA that appear later on in the game.
Soon afterward, Dr. McNeil is captured, but Angelus defies Warhurst's orders and rescues her. The NSA campaign ends with McNeil revealing that Angelus is going to leave the planet with some Virens from Hrog on their clan ship to recover the CSS Astrid, whose access key was in the pod from the first level. Apparently, Parker stole it after Dark Conspiracy and installed a device called the Singularity Drive, which was built by the same race that built the Xenofax of Krieg. It has the ability to send the Astrid through the intergalactic barrier, allowing all of the NSA left on Morningstar to escape the Terrans forever. Parker apparently landed the Astrid on a planet in Viren space, and all that needs to be done is for Angelus and the Virens to go retrieve it and bring it back to Morningstar for the evacuation.
Overall, the story for Ground Control 2 is actually a little bit better than Ground Control 1's. The characters have just as much depth, but the fact that there are more of them means that you get more characters that are developed well. The NSA have a good emotional stake in defending the planet because it is their home, unlike for Kraven and Order in the first game where it was just a random planet to fight over. The Virens add a good alien twist to the story because we have not seen an alien race in the games yet. Also, the Terrans are a very good enemy because they are very clear-cut since you don't play as them, so they have a chance to be much more evil than the Order or Kraven had a chance to be.
On to the gameplay, which has undergone a huge number of significant changes from the first game in Dark Conspiracy. One big change is in unit capabilities. In the first game, units had a special weapon and a special ability, but now units have a secondary mode that they can change into on command. A good comparison are the basic infantry from each game. In Ground Control, the Craven Marines had machine guns, but could activate a mortar a few times, as well as use an emergency medkit a couple of times in a battle. In Operation Exodus, the Light Assault Infantry have machine guns as well, but can switch into a secondary mode where they can't move, but can fire rockets. Every unit has a secondary mode that can radically change their role on the battlefield.
Another big change is the addition of the ability to garrison infantry inside of buildings. This makes infantry much more useful in the defensive capacity than they were in Ground Control or Dark Conspiracy. The only odd choice they made is that you actually have to pick a side of the building for the infantry to be on. Even worse, some buildings actually cannot garrison infantry on some sides, making it really inconvenient if you're trying to defend a location and can't have your infantry face a certain direction. Still, it is a very useful mechanic, especially in the urban games where you can set up ambushes and defensive choke points very easily with infantry.
Don't worry, there are even more big changes to come. The entire battlefield has been remade, and by that I mean there are specific points on the map that you can now capture, instead of a huge battleground like Ground Control. There are two types of points: control points and landing zones. Landing zones do what you would expect by allowing you to choose where you want to call in your dropship, instead of being locked into a landing zone like in the first game. The control points generate action points for you. Action points are a new currency in the game used to purchase new units to send to your landing zone, upgrade your dropship with things like increased speed to get to the battlefield faster, weapons to kill enemies near the landing zone when it arrives, and increased cargo space to bring more units to the battlefield at one time. Action points are also used for the new fire support options, with a couple of choices like smoke screens, artillery fire, and a few others. This system seemed very tacked on, as there are very few options available, even in wide-open skirmish games, but this system will resurface later on in World in Conflict.
Speaking of the dropship, its role has been greatly expanded from Ground Control. Instead of just being an animated object that delivered your units to a battlefield, now it is actually its own unit. It can be upgraded, as I said, to make it more viable in combat or make it easier for you to get troops at once. Unfortunately, you can still only call it to one landing zone, but a very interesting new ability that it has is that you can actually have it stay at a landing zone after it has delivered the units to help provide fire support. So if you upgrade its weapons and you have it stay at the landing zone for a short while if it's being attacked, it's a great defensive mobile structure to have defend the landing zone.
Don't worry, we've almost covered all of the big gameplay changes we're going to talk about. Mission starts are now different in this game as well. In the campaign, you are given a few units at the start of the match that are different depending on what campaign mission you are doing, and you can call in new ones only once you've captured a landing zone. In skirmish mode or multiplayer, you actually start out with nothing but a landing zone and some action points to buy whatever you want to start your conquest of the map with. There is actually another modifier for action points: maintenance. It simply reduces your AP income depending on how many units you have at one time, so it becomes harder and harder to get units as the game goes on if you have a big army. It also gives players who are behind in units a chance to replenish them faster than players who are dominating the match with giant armies.
The final gameplay change we're going to be talking about today is a special ability of the Virons. When you're buying units to be delivered in the dropship, it may seem like the Virons have a few less options available to them than the NSA do. However, this is because the Virons have a very special ability that all of their units can do: the meld. What it is two units of the same type for the Virons actually come together and form a more powerful new unit. This is an incredibly useful ability because it allows you to change your entire army's composition on the fly in the battlefield. Even better, you can unmeld the unit at any time back into its two constituent units, making you have even more options available, as it's not a permanent change. However, one minor problem with this is that when you're buying units for the dropship to bring in, for the NSA or the Virons, you can see what their secondary ability is and what they're useful for on the battlefield. However, there's no listing for these melded units for the Virons, So you have to practice with the various units and see what they'll actually meld into and what they can do. So if you're up for memorizing what these various units are, then you can use them to great effect on the battlefield, but don't try to use them too much your first time around, as you might be surprised with what you end up and be killed because you don't have the right units.
Finally, let's quickly talk about the graphics. They have been substantially improved from Ground Control and Dark Conspiracy. There are a great deal more complicated weapon effects with a greater variety than there were in the first game. The animations are overall smoother, and overall the textures are higher quality, both on the units and definitely on the terrain, especially in the nice new urban maps that Ground Control lacked. The FMVs also look much better than they did in Ground Control. Overall, the graphics are very improved from the first game, and while not amazing by today's standards, were very impressive back when it released and are still more than functional today, and definitely do surpass the original.
Do I recommend Ground Control 2 Operation Exodus? Absolutely. The story is just as good and even better than Ground Control 1, and the fact that it connects to that story is a great reward for players of the old game. But you don't have to have played it because it explains everything you need to know. The cutscenes are great, and the graphics are also a big improvement over the first game. The only real problem with it is trying to get it to run on a modern machine, as you do have to tweak with the files a little bit to get it to work, but it can be done and it is worth it. For next time, I'm going to finish off the game reviews of Massive Month with World in Conflict. But until next time guys, my name is Timpedia and I'll catch you guys later.